Brendan Rodgers is a man with a higher managerial win percentage than the likes of Rafa Benitez, Arsene Wenger, and even Jurgen Klopp. Fluent in English, Spanish and Italian, Rodgers got his first big break in 2004, age 31, when Jose Mourinho invited him to join Chelsea as a youth team boss. Rodgers went into coaching so young because his playing career had been halted by a genetic knee condition at the age of only 20, and as is becoming something of a catchphrase for me on this channel, unfulfilled playing careers often make for the best coaches and managers. It's interesting to see some of the revisionism surrounding Brendan Rodgers, who was pretty roundly mocked and derided when his time at Liverpool came to an end. But now, everyone seems to pretend as though that never happened due to his success at Celtic and the job he has done in Leicestershire. Anyhow, that is just a small aside. But today I thought I'd take a look at what a combined Brodge 11 might look like. It's important to know that how each player played under Rodgers was as important as their talent in my decision-making process for this video. So whilst Pepe Reina and Roberto Firmino were or are great players for Liverpool, neither showed their best form or played for very long under Brendan Rodgers, hence why they don't feature. Without further ado then, here is my ultimate Brendan Rodgers best 11, a 7-man bench, and some honourable mentions. Goalkeeper, Kasper Schmeichel. Brendan Rodgers has managed plenty of fine goalkeepers in his time, and picking which one would make my 7-man bench later on was a really tricky call. For the number 1 spot, however, I don't think there can be too many doubts over Kasper Schmeichel's inclusion. The acrobatic Dane was already midway through his 8th season at the King Power Stadium when Rodgers took over at Leicester City a little over 2 years ago, and he was already among the most accomplished goalkeepers within the Premier League. I think he has become an even more reliable and consistent pair of hands under the Northern Irishman though, and he was one of my earlier selections in this 11. Right back, Ricardo Pereira. Staying in Leicester for now, at Brendan Rodgers' current club, subscribers to HITC Sevens and frequent viewers will be well aware of the high regard that I hold Ricardo Pereira in. Swansea City legend Angel Rangel surely deserves an honourable mention, having played the best football of his very consistent career under Brendan Rodgers. But with all due respect to the Spaniard, I think Pereira is in a slightly different league. Signed by Leicester from Porto for €25 million in the summer before Rodgers arrived at the club, Pereira was an instant hit, and he only improved, along with the rest of the Foxes side, after Rodgers arrived. Tireless, direct, and defensively astute, I thought Pereira was up there as one of the best fullbacks in the league before suffering a devastating cruciate ligament injury last season, and it's great to see him back in action now. Centre-back, Ashley Williams. A Swansea City legend may miss out at right-back, but the same cannot be said for the right side of centre-back. Signed by Swansea City from Stockport County for just £400,000 in the summer of 2008, it's difficult to overestimate just how good of a signing that was by the Swans. They got 8 seasons of stellar service out of Williams, who became a real leader, at the Liberty Stadium, as well as becoming one of the most accomplished centre-backs in the Premier League. They sold him at just the right time in 2016 to Everton for around £12 million, or was it £16 million? Who knows, where he was nowhere near as impressive, but for just 2 seasons under Brendan Rodgers in South Wales, Williams was practically faultless, thus ensuring him of a starting berth. Centre-back, Jonny Evans. Just a nailed-on starter whose inclusion was never in any doubt, Jonny Evans is an excellent centre-back who Manchester United were mad to sell back in 2015. Outstanding for both West Brom and Leicester City, whilst Evans' centre-back partners have often been more celebrated than him, rarely have they been more important. Evans is the only one of Brendan Rodgers' compatriots to feature in this 11, and if there has been a more consistent centre-back in the Premier League over the last few years, well, I can't think of them. Discounting Virgil van Dijk, of course, who has just been injured for a while. Admittedly, that is not of his own doing. Left back, Kieran Tierney. Our first inclusion from Brendan Rodgers' time north of the border, Rodgers' time at Celtic was by far the most successful period of his career. Whilst Celtic were already the dominant force within the Scottish game when he arrived, Rodgers stepped things up a notch, as the club went unbeaten during his debut league campaign and completed a historic double treble. Key to much of that success was Celtic's outstanding young left-back Kieran Tierney, who made the PFA Scotland Team of the Year in every season that Rodgers spent in Scotland. A brilliant left-back who is now starting to show his class on a consistent basis at Arsenal, Tierney had an enormous influence on games from the fullback position at Parkhead, and he comfortably sees off the challenge of Ben Chilwell to secure a starting berth. Defensive midfield, Wilfred Ndidi. I suspect the comments section will be rife with jokes about Joe Allen, but whilst the Welshman did do a fine job for Rodgers, particularly at Swansea City, I don't think even the Brodge would pick him ahead of Wilfred Ndidi. Now in his 5th season with Leicester City, still aged only 24, Ndidi has never been better, but the fine work that he does, often off the ball, has almost become background noise. The reality is that Ndidi has been outstanding this season, leading the way for Leicester in terms of both tackles and interceptions per 90, and I think you could make a good case for him having been Leicester's Player of the Year this season when he has been fit. All things considered, I think he simply has to start. Central midfield, Yuri Tielemans. It is a mark of the talents of this current Leicester City team, currently 3rd in the Premier League table, that I felt obliged to include so many of their players. Yuri Tielemans is a superb footballer who reeks of class in almost everything that he does. Elegant, intelligent, and technically brilliant, he has played 347 games at club level, in addition to winning 36 caps for Belgium, all at the age of 23, which is pretty absurd. His reputation took a very brief setback after he failed to hit the ground running at Monaco, but ever since joining Leicester, initially on loan and then on a permanent, he has been nothing short of sensational. It's exciting to think that the best of the Belgian should still be to come, but he's already done enough, and is talented enough, in my eyes, to earn a place in this 11. Central midfield, Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard's peak was probably the mid to late 2000s, between the Reds' Champions League win in 2005 and his telepathic relationship with Fernando Torres at the end of the decade. Brendan Rodgers arrived at Liverpool a couple of years after that peak, and it was under Rodgers that Gerrard adapted his game to become more of a deep-lying playmaker. It might not have been Gerrard at his explosive, dynamic best, breaking ranks and making things happen all over the pitch, but he was still outstanding, and routinely among Liverpool's best players. Gerrard came second in Liverpool's Player of the Season voting in Rodgers' debut campaign, and he bagged 14 goals and 16 assists as Liverpool came agonisingly close to winning the Premier League title the following season. All things considered, he had to feature, and he does so as by far the most experienced head within a very talented midfield diamond. Attacking midfield, Philippe Coutinho. I went for a wingerless diamond formation, despite Brendan Rodgers having managed some outstanding white players over the years, due in no small part to the fact that I had to find a spot for Philippe Coutinho. It's interesting to note, by the way, that Gerrard was the 8th player to feature in this 11, and the first from Liverpool, which perhaps says something about the Reds' defensive strength during Rodgers' time at the club, but Coutinho very quickly makes it 2 in the forward areas. Coutinho was signed by Liverpool halfway through Brendan Rodgers' first season as a once hotly tipped Brazilian youngster whose rise appeared to have faltered at Inter Milan, allowing Liverpool to sign him for just £8.5 million. That would prove to be a very good piece of business, and Coutinho became one of the most entertaining and dangerous midfielders in the Premier League under Rodgers. He won the Liverpool Fans and Players Player of the Year awards in both Rodgers' last full season in charge at Anfield and during the season in which he was replaced in October by Jurgen Klopp. A real live wire, brilliant on the ball, and devastating from range, Rodgers has had some excellent number 10s over the years, but Coutinho is the pick of the bunch. Centre forward, Jamie Vardy. How could I leave out Jamie Vardy? The Premier League's Benjamin Button shows few signs of meaningful decline at the age of 34, having won the Premier League Golden Boot for the first time last season, and he's already bagged 14 goals in 31 games during the current campaign. Whilst a number of players in this 11 were greatly improved under Rodgers, that's not really the case with Vardy, who has been consistently excellent since Leicester's famous title-winning campaign, which was 5 seasons ago now. Quick, hard-working, and direct, Vardy sets the tempo for Leicester City from the front, and the way in which he stretches opponents creates gaps for the likes of Harvey Barnes and James Maddison to exploit. I think his inclusion may be the one that I ummed and ahed over for the longest period in this 11, but ultimately, it is well deserved. Centre forward, Luis Suarez. Making it a pair of Premier League Golden Boot winners up front, Luis Suarez was the first name on this team sheet, and is without any shadow of a doubt the finest player that Brendan Rodgers has ever managed. While Suarez had previously scored prolifically at Ajax, and was obviously an immensely gifted and talented centre forward, I wonder if Brendan Rodgers perhaps doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves in terms of aiding his development. It's often said that Suarez almost dragged Rodgers to a Premier League title, which is true in some respects, But in the 18 months before Rodgers arrived at Anfield, Suarez had only scored 15 goals in 44 Premier League games, and under Rodgers, he bagged 54 goals in 66 Premier League outings. I'm not saying that's solely down to the work of Brendan Rodgers and his staff, I just think it ought to be noted. During his last season at Anfield, in which Liverpool came within inches of winning the league, Suarez put in perhaps the finest individual season of the Premier League era. He scored 31 goals in 33 games, despite not taking a single penalty, and he would hit even greater heights during his second season at Barcelona. One of the finest centre-forwards of his generation, Suarez belongs firmly to the bracket of players just below Messi and Ronaldo during the post-2010 era, and he waltzes straight into this starting 11 as its star man. A straight partnership of prime Suarez and Jamie Vardy would be absolute chaos. That may be my 11 done and dusted, but there is still the small matter of my substitutes and a handful of honourable mentions. As backup to Kasper Schmeichel, I've actually gone for Craig Gordon, who was superb for Rodgers at Parkhead. Defensive reinforcements arrive in the form of Daniel Agger, who was excellent for Brodge at Anfield and only missed out on a starting berth due to his persistent injury problems under the Northern Irishman, which potentially cost Liverpool the Premier League title. Depth in midfield comes courtesy of Celtic legend Scott Brown, who twice won the Celtic Player of the Year award and was routinely brilliant under Rodgers, and Gylfi Sigurdsson, who becomes our earliest inclusion, having lit up the Championship under Rodgers at Reading, where he scored 20 goals and made 8 assists in just 44 games from midfield. The final 3 substitutes could form a tremendous front 3 all of their own, in their finest vintage, and all came close to starting. They are Raheem Sterling, Daniel Sturridge, and Moussa Dembele. Sterling was one of the best young players on the planet for Liverpool under Rodgers, even if his best football has unsurprisingly followed later on at Manchester City. Daniel Sturridge was superb alongside Sterling and Suarez in Liverpool's 2013-14 season, which almost saw him start. But ultimately, I think Vardy has been more consistent under Rodgers. And Moussa Dembele scored 32 goals in his first season under Brendan Rodgers, and whatever you think of Scottish football, I know it's very in vogue to slag it off, that warrants a place at least on the bench. And the Frenchman has further proved his class at Lyon before joining Atletico Madrid on loan with a view to a permanent in January. That is my 11 and bench done and dusted, but very honourable mentions must go to the likes of James Maddison, Ryan Bertrand, Scott Sinclair, Angel Rangel, Joe Allen, Michel Vorm, Pepe Reina, Jordan Henderson, Martin Skirtle, Roberto Firmino, Stuart Armstrong, Tom Rogic, James Forrest, Odsonne Edouard, Lee Griffiths, Ben Chilwell, Chaglar Soyuncu, Harry Maguire, and Harvey Barnes. And breathe. Thank you all as ever for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video, it is greatly appreciated. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for the one and only HITC Sevens. And you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram by the username at HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.